The Witch by Jordan Willis. I used to love children. Despite not being able to have my own, I still found something to tend to make the forest feel like a home. My beloved garden that sprouted sweet-smelling flowers in the spring and even sweeter fruit in the summer. I never went hungry, and I tried to make sure the neighboring village didn't either whenever I could. I still long for the burning of the sun on my skin as I cared for my gardens, wishing it would replace the sensation of searing flames. Despite it being my pride and joy, I would trade my entire livelihood if it meant never having met those rabid monsters. When one thinks of rabid creatures, never in a million years could they have the slightest inclination to imagine the tragic series of events that make up my story. Children would be the last thing anyone would suspect to have caused such a tragedy. Curse the good's burning need to help the helpless. God only knows if it was something they picked up while out in the forest or if they'd always been this way. In all my years, I've never seen someone so hungry, like all the food in the world couldn't satiate the ache in their bellies. The continuing demand for sweet things should have been the first clue that something was amiss. Sweet. The word the two repeated over and over with a look in their eyes that I had only seen mirrored on the face of a dying rabid animal. They tore all of the food from my garden and still insisted that they were hungry. When I said I didn't have much more to give, the children only grew more hostile. I was the only one for miles deep in the forest. My supply was limited to what I could grow myself or carry home from the long journeys to the village. Once they had exhausted almost everything fresh in my possession, I turned my attention to the burning oven, hoping a hot meal may settle them down. The pair had unceremoniously let themselves into my house and quickly became fascinated with the burning embers in the stove. The sweet smell of pastries in the oven and the soup on the hearth filled the air. The shadows from the forest began to elongate as the sun sank lower and lower. With the setting sun, I expected the two to have tired themselves out, but the rabid enthusiasm with which they destroyed my few belongings continued into the late evening. The children tore through my home, continuing to demand things before they began trying to eat things that were entirely inedible, claiming the house was made of candy. I tried to stop them, restrain them in some way, but every time I got close, they wailed about how hungry they were. Their desperate cries of hungry continued for hours until it seemed like that was the only word they'd ever known. It finally came time to retrieve the pastries from the oven, a large wood-burning contraption I had fashioned that was large enough for whatever I might need it for. As I bent to retrieve the food from the oven, I heard the children giggling behind me. I hoped that finally, whatever insanity had plagued them had finally subsided, leaving the sweet innocence behind. My hopes were swiftly dashed as I felt two sets of hands on my back shoving me forward towards the flames. The heavy metal door swung shut as the rabid little beasts locked me in my own oven. My home deep in the forest quickly filled with smoke as my hair and clothes began to smolder. A home in the forest always seemed like a good idea, secluded with only my plants and the occasional traveler to keep me company. Now, over the roaring flames, I could still hear the hungry vermin continue to wreck what once was my home. The rabid ferocity with which they demolished in minutes what it had taken a lifetime to build shook me to my core as the temperature continued to rise. The burning heat of the oven pricked my skin as I felt my own flesh begin to bubble. The sweet stench of cooking meat that permeated my nostrils made me sick as I realized what it was, and it was then that my screams joined the cacophony of chaos in my house. The children were the only thing I could hear as I continued to burn, almost as if they were taunting me. I can only wonder why someone would send two such young children into the forest by themselves, but now I think I know why. I have to think there's a reason something so viciously hungry for destruction would be disguised as something so deceptively sweet. As the burning consumes me and engulfs my senses, I think I now understand why we're told not to play with rabid animals. Hey, this is your friendly neighborhood editing Jordan from Nat One Podcast. If you enjoyed the story you just listened to, let us know by clicking the like button, subscribing, and maybe leaving a comment. You can also catch us in some more lighthearted content over on our TikTok and Twitter accounts. Now, don't worry, this is not replacing any of our usual podcast or gaming content. This is just a fun little addition, because I would like to be the master of fright for a little bit. That being said, we should have a couple more episodes of these fun little short stories, written by yours truly, of course, coming at you as we move further into spooky season. In the meantime, go check out some of our other content, either the podcast or some of our gaming stuff, and watch out for strange children in the woods.